First and Last. First and Last on ESPN Radio and on the ESPN app.
Oklahoma City will work with Carmelo Anthony to try to figure out how they will exit this one-year relationship.
The Oklahoma City Thunder were looking for the old Carmelo Anthony. Carmelo Anthony was looking for the old Carmelo Anthony.
You're the Houston Rockets. You desperately need a Carmelo Anthony.
On the sheer basketball front, he does fit with what the Rockets are doing.
Carmelo did not get in Oklahoma City. He will get in Houston because Chris Paul will make sure he gets it. He gets it.
All these lights, you can't blind me. With your love, nobody can drag me down.
It's First and Last. Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. Callers join us via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. And you can tweet the show on the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed at ESPN Radio and at MGolic Jr. 57. Back 2 days in a row. We're really stringing them together now, Allie. This is where we get back fully on the horse. We've returned from all this summer time off, 4th of July. We're ready to buckle down and do the work again.
We're ready to not get any sleep anymore.
Yeah, no, that's really what this comes down to, is we're ready to go back. I forgot, and I really have come to enjoy this time slot. It's kind of that 300 style mentality where it's you and this small band of people that are up at these weird, strange hours of the night, whether it's West Coast or East Coast. And I don't know, there's a weird sense of brotherhood that comes with it. When you meet people out in public and there are people that are up when the show is on, I always feel the need to apologize because that means they're up at some terrible hour. But there is something sort of endearing about it until you go through 2 weeks where you get normal sleep. Then you're kind of reminded, oh man, this is why everyone else functions so much better than me at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That's why you were all looking through these kind, not bloodshot eyes at that point, and I look like I just crawled out of a dumpster. But other than that, it's great to be back. And we know we've gotten our second wind. Like, that's what you always worry about. Second day of a back-to-back, you worry about starting to drag a little bit. And then I got reminded because I was thinking about NBA free agency. And yesterday I said we're kind of on the back nine of NBA free agency for the summer. The names involved aren't quite as sexy. Again, the Zach LaVine drama from over the weekend seemed to dominate headlines in a way that to me indicated, all right, it's time to start looking towards NFL training camps. Then I got a little reminder. I said, wait a minute. We still got some interesting enough names out there. And then yesterday happened. And I really got reminded that, you know what? All right, Carmelo Anthony. Probably the perfect case study for the stage of free agency that we're at. Because Carmelo Anthony, OKC version, stay M7-0, not quite as mellow. Not quite as mellow in Oklahoma City last year. And so it's changed the way that we look at this. But when you start to couple that with some things that we have both seen and heard, now it starts to get a little interesting. Because yesterday, according to our own Adrian Wojnarowski, free agent forward Luc Mbah a Moute agreed to a 1-year, $4.3 million deal with the Clippers, signing for their balance of the mid-level exception there after his one season away from the Houston Rockets. But you couple that with the loss of Trevor Ariza for the Rockets as well, and now they're starting to hurt a little bit in that one area where they were really, really great last year and in the last couple seasons behind the three-point arc. And so all this leads to say is after hearing about how much Carmelo might want to be in Los Angeles, the prospect of playing with LeBron James being appealing, Houston seems to be emerging as not only a realistic contender, but maybe the more appealing contender. And Jenny Dial-Creech, the Houston Chronicle columnist, joined Freddie and Fitzsimmons on ESPN Radio and said that the fit would be pretty ideal for both sides.
Carmelo Anthony's specialty is and always has been putting the ball in the basket, right? And he plays a lot of ISO, and it doesn't work with everyone. That's why he gets called out for not being a team player all the time. But that's his specialty. There is no better coach in the NBA at facilitating that specialty than Mike D'Antoni. That's the system he's created in Houston. The majority of it is James Harden, and Carmelo Anthony would have to understand that. But when Harden's resting, when Paul needs a breather, if you have another guy who does what those two guys do, you don't have to change anything up when you're the Rockets. There's a lot of ifs and ands and things that he has to do. There's some egos that have to be swallowed. But on the sheer basketball front, he does fit with what the Rockets are doing.
First and last, Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio. We're presented by Progressive's Home Insurance. Protecting your small business is a big deal. Cover what you've worked so hard for. Visit progressivecommercial.com. And it's interesting what's going to wait on this decision, but in either spot, you have, assuming that LeBron and the Lakers and Houston and the names mentioned there are the most likely destinations, you've got a similar dynamic in both, which is Carmelo Anthony is going to have to trust that a veteran player whom he's spent time around, who he's close with in either LeBron or in Chris Paul, who he's played on the Olympic basketball team on Team USA with before, he's going to have to trust that they are going to put him in the best position to succeed, but he's going to have to do that at the expense of what he's used to. I heard Steve Kerr talking yesterday about the acquisition of Boogie Cousins on their team, and he said there was a very frank conversation that had to be had with Boogie saying, are you going to be comfortable getting the ball less than you're used to? Are you going to be comfortable with fewer touches in our offense? You know, we like to work through the post, all these things, but we can't guarantee you the volume that you're used to because we have 4 other all-stars on this team. And he said, yes, of course, I understand. There's going to have to be that conversation with Carmelo Anthony. There's going to have to be that understanding that this can't be what you're used to because that's not who you are anymore. And that's not what we need. It's got to be symbiotic. And that's where I heard Michael Eaves yesterday, filling in on the Will Cain show, said he believes in Houston specifically, a guy like Chris Paul could be a huge benefit to Carmelo.
The thing that Chris Paul will give Melo that he won't get in Los Angeles is concern. And I mean that in the sense that Chris Paul is a point guard. He's always concerned about everything on the court, how it fits in together, how it relates to something else. Russell Westbrook is not that type of point guard. He's just different in personality. He's different in skill set. He's different in position. So what Carmelo did not get in Oklahoma City, he will get in Houston because Chris Paul will make sure he gets it. Melo understands going there, he's not the best player on the team. He has to realize that. There's no question he cannot understand that. So the expectations have to be different.
Yeah.
But Chris Paul understands what Carmelo would need in order to keep him engaged, but also in order to put him in the best position to succeed so the team succeeds. He gets that more in Houston than any other place in the league.
First and last, Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio. That I don't agree with because that is also, I think, who LeBron James is. And whatever you believe about the way the Lakers are currently structuring their team, this counterculture to Golden State's three-point happy, free-flowing offense, either way, we know it eventually comes back to LeBron James controlling a lion's share of the distribution of the ball, whether it's from the post, whether it's from the point forward spot. He's going to be doling it out. And LeBron James has shown a propensity to not only put his teammates in the best position to score, but that's his MO, that's his desire, that's his base setting, is wanting to be that able distributor. For a guy like Carmelo, who when put in the right position, most people believe still has that capability of being a scorer, of being a guy who can give you buckets on that. And now defensively, that's a whole other conversation that has to be had. That's an area where this transaction doesn't quite balance out the loss for Houston. And for Houston, who was, I think, 6th in defensive rating in the NBA as a team last season, and for Los Angeles, who says they want to build their identity around a grittier defensive approach, in addition to everything else that's been talked about there, yeah, Carmelo Anthony is not quite a circular peg into a circular hole there. But he still offers you something, and at the price you're going to get him at this point, that seems like a something worth exploring. If I'm Carmelo, I think it's Houston. That is a team that's just closer to competing at the level you need at this stage in your career than anything else. But now the draw starts to become just how much is Los Angeles and that kind of market still mean to Carmelo Anthony, and how much does the draw of playing with LeBron James that he mentioned by name that we heard as a guy he wants to play with still hold up. 888-729-3776, 888-SAY-ESPN is our telephone number. Coming up next, we're going to update a very important first round of polls from yesterday. We're going to get some helpful and friendly advice from someone that we trust, a champion. And we're going to revisit the domino that we thought would fall first. Ends up becoming the domino that may fall last. It's all next. It's First and Last on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
Yo, tell you what I want, what I really, really want. So tell me what you want, what you really, really want. I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want. So tell me what you want, what you really, really want. I wanna really, really, really wanna zig a zig. If you want my future.
I can remember a time when we all thought Remember how funny this was? Kawhi Leonard's going to be the first domino to fall in NBA free agency. It's first and last. Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. It's time for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts. That seems like a lifetime ago, and we'll get to that, but we've got really way more important business to discuss. I feel so behind the eight ball because I missed Very Cavallari on Sunday night, and I didn't get to see the glory and the awe-inspiring performance that apparently was Jay Cutler. And I'm not surprised at all. Jay Cutler has always been an infinitely fascinating figure, provided that he's not your quarterback. But, Allie, I feel like we missed out because neither of us saw the premiere Sunday night. All I saw was it getting rave reviews, and more importantly, Jay getting rave reviews. I heard people say so much that if this show succeeds, it is going to be on the strength of Jay Cutler.
I'm a little disappointed in both of us.
This is right in our wheelhouse.
I know, it is. It totally is. I mean, we are, as we said during the break, suffering through the season of The Bachelorette.
Oh.
And we could be watching great Jay Cutler.
This is the first time I think you can pinpoint Jay Cutler as the reason a team will definitively succeed. That seems like an accurate statement at this point, but it's true. And I saw a clip of Adam Gase talking from one of the coaches meetings, the owners meetings, saying Jay Cutler was going to be biting commentary in the broadcast booth if that was what he chose to do. That is this guy's personality, and apparently it was on full display. The clips I saw were electric. It's just Jay it's all the facial expressions and all of the physical demeanor that made him a nightmare if he was your team's quarterback that are going to make him an unbelievable reality TV star.
I just want to see if he's like what we have pictured in our heads about Jay Cutler.
I think that's why it was so satisfying for people,
because
it's exactly what we knew.
Man, all right. I'm going to go watch it when we get out of here.
Yeah, no, this needs to happen. So that's your update in the world of trash reality. See, it's nice when we butt up like this because Jay Cutler's going to be a draw. He's going to bring people to that show that wouldn't have been there to begin with. I'm convinced because we all crave this desire. We all have it within us, especially now, to want to know what's going on, what makes our favorite athletes tick, and what are they like when the curtain gets pulled back a little bit. You're going to get that with Jay Cutler, and we've always kind of gotten that with Jay Cutler. He's always worn it on his sleeves a little bit. Perfect segue to Kawhi Leonard, who I mentioned is the human projection screen. Kawhi Leonard allows you to project whatever feelings you had at that current moment in time, whatever you desire a pro athlete to be. If you desired a pro athlete to be the strong, silent type, a selfless teammate, someone who is giving to the cause, Kawhi Leonard had plenty of that for you to start his career. If now you have decided that Kawhi Leonard is inherently selfish, that he is a diva, if he is all the awful things in the world, well, you now have the ability to make that claim as well. Because given the context, you can now project that. It's all become really interesting for the public perception of Kawhi Leonard, but Sarah Spain, co-host of Spain and Fitz on ESPN Radio, 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern, every Monday through Friday, says from a basketball sense, from a team sense now, the longer this goes on, the guy that was supposed to kick off free agency and let us know where LeBron and Paul George and the rest of these guys were going to go, the longer this goes on, the less and less Kawhi Leonard has to use in his favor.
When this all began, it felt like all of the strength was on Kawhi's side, right? You guys have done something wrong. I don't think you handled this right. I want out. Now the Spurs are left scrambling, right? What are they going to do? This was the future of their franchise. And yeah, it still does most negatively affect the Spurs because they did sort of have this heir apparent that was ready to get the Supermax. But the longer this goes on, the more it feels like Kawhi is going to have to keep leaking out, well, also maybe the Celtics. Well, actually, I really like Portland. Well, I don't know, Toronto. It feels like every time a door shuts, he's going to have to go searching for something else. And he's probably not talked his way out of a Supermax deal.
First and last, Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. Kawhi Leonard effectively throwing his hat in the ring for every city that feels like it could have the slogan, keep blank weird. He'd be a real great fit. If you could just move the Dallas Mavericks to Austin, I feel like Kawhi Leonard would finally be going home. A lot of craft brewing and boutique artisanal jam shops. But I digress. Kawhi Leonard, going to be a unique fit. We heard the rumblings from his camp that he doesn't want to play with LeBron James for the Los Angeles Lakers. He would be more comfortable with a team like, say, the LA Clippers. all the other names that have been thrown around. But the one that was most interesting to me that started popping up more and more, and they've been a team that gets talked about because Danny Ainge is a wheeler and a dealer, because they constantly are loaded with draft picks and young assets and all the things that are desirable if you're going to play let's make a deal NBA style. The Boston Celtics, culture-wise, fit-wise, the most Spurs-like team that the NBA has to offer. A young, brilliant head coach in Brad Stevens, a team-first approach that netted them very positive results, an Eastern Conference Finals appearance, probably a year sooner than anyone expected, especially given what they had lost already. That seems like an interesting landing spot for me. Don't tell that, I should say, to Bob Ryan of the Boston Globe, who joined Golic and Wingo yesterday.
I do not want to make any trade. I want to keep what they have. I want to see the team with Hayward and with Irving, with this group as it matured through the playoffs, and see what we got here. We don't need him. Probably the third best player in the league, and I understand that. And in theory, assuming he's going to come back healthy. But this team doesn't need him.
First and last, Michael Okuu Jr. here on ESPN Radio. And this is interesting because Danny Ainge gets so much credit for what he does do, what he does go out and go after, that I think in this case it would be telling if this is the area he wasn't willing to go. If he's finally gotten to a point where, like Bob Ryan mentioned, you'd like to actually see what you've got under the hood before you go ahead and move too many of the parts around. And more importantly, it would speak to the volatility that that Kawhi Leonard presents right now. That becomes interesting is as we go along that timeline, Sarah brought it up. Does it just give us more time to look at the warts that have come up through this situation? Because so much of the focus early on was, well, Kawhi Leonard is still Kawhi Leonard, the player that we know. And if he is, that's a devastating force to be able to add to your team. What is it complicated by? Is it complicated by all of the things we, again, don't know? We don't know what motivates Kawhi Leonard. We don't know how much those decisions are going to factor in, and we've never even gotten an inkling from the guy. We've gotten to project everything that we want onto Kawhi Leonard. We have not gotten anything in return from Kawhi Leonard. And so we sit and wait now, and he may end up being the capstone to free agency. And I say free agency knowing full well he's not a free agent. The one thing I felt certain about going into this whole process was that everything in this was so broken that Kawhi Leonard would never end up back on the San Antonio Spurs. That throughout this process, the fissure that broke along the lines of trust based on the mishandling of injury and all these things that are so important in the life of an athlete, I never thought he'd end up back in San Antonio. Then all of a sudden, Tony Parker signs in Charlotte. Now we wait and see about the future. If anything were to happen maybe to Manu this offseason as he gets up into the twilight of his career, what would have to happen for Kawhi to feel comfortable coming back there? Has that conversation with Greg Popovich occurred yet? Will it outside of a Team USA camp? A lot of questions we have to answer from a guy that won't give us anything. Straight Talk Wireless, nationwide coverage on America's largest and most dependable 4G LTE networks. All right, coming up next, our summer take question of the day. Very first one. Going to put me directly against my father, co-host of Golic and Wingo, 6 to 10 a.m. Eastern every day. We'll tell you why he is going to be dead wrong about everything he tries to tell you today. It's First and Last here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
Now, First and Last. First and Last on ESPN Radio and on the ESPN app.
When I look in my father's eyes,
First and Last, Michael Okuu Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. Get in touch with us in the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. That's 888-729-3776. And get triple action protection for optimal engine performance with Shell V-Power Nitro Plus Premium Gasoline. All right, guys, summertime. Weather is fine. The takes, they have been a-flowing. We do what we have to do to get through this time of year. Survival mode is kicked in right now. And so in order to make that work, we came up with an idea around here, and I say we to include myself in an idea that our producer, Allie, came up with. It's a great idea, and we looked around and we said, you know what, we hear a lot of hear a lot of stuff get said over and over again, a lot of stuff that just takes hold, ends up being the argument of the day. And there's been plenty of them, a lot of them that are going to pop up over the course of this time of year you're going to recognize. Why? Because they're popular takes. And so we decided, all right, listen, instead of just arguing the merit of each take, why don't we pit them against each other? Why don't we create a bracket? A bracket of summer takes to get us through this time period. And so, I'm going to kick this off. We've got production for it now, too, because it's official. We've got production and a actual physical bracket that Allie drew on the back of a work desk calendar yesterday. The budget's not quite there yet, but we're getting closer. We're getting closer. And so, without further ado, we're going to update you. We started this yesterday with 2 poll questions, and we're going to add to it today.
Summer Take Bracket.
I am going to wear out that drop in particular because I love that Carlos Santana song.
Summer Take Bracket.
Every time it's going to leave me wanting more, which is perfect because that's what we want. We want you to come back for more of this. So we started off yesterday just to give you an idea of what we were looking for here. Yesterday's polls. Sports franchises. We asked you, the Yankees, are they the best sports franchise? Or the Cowboys, are they the best sports franchise? Which of these is the better take? See, I said the Yankees. This is an easy answer for me. But the better take is that the Cowboys have done it because the Cowboys have basically elevated and popularized mediocrity. They have been a 500 ball club really since that triplets era in the 90s. And yet somehow they have maintained their stranglehold atop the value list of franchises that Forbes puts out every year. Just the front and center portion of our psyche when it comes to the NFL. They get it. They're there. That being said, the Yankees beat the Cowboys 83% to 17% yesterday. They will advance to the next round. So, listen, you've got plenty of ammo. Just work on sharpening your take a little bit. The other one, in honor of the World Cup, had to do with the U.S. men's national team, who was conspicuously absent from this World Cup. And so it prompted us to ask, do we believe they would ever win a World Cup? Well, 74% of you believe that the U.S. men's national team will never win a World Cup is the better take. So now that one advances. So it's the same idea, is which of these hits home? Which of these is going to draw the response out of your opponent necessary? Now, some of them are just too deeply personal for me to even focus on, and that's where we find ourselves today. It's First and Last, Mike Golic Jr., here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. Today we find ourselves in the most personal spot that this is going to get. Today's
Summer Take Bracket.
Which position is more important? Today's take. Offensive line, more important to your football team versus the take of defensive line, more important to your football team. And I understand right now, it sounds like utter nonsense. No one would argue for those mindless lunatics on the defensive side of the ball. No one would be that dumb. My dad is going to be that dumb today. He's going to try and sell you some false bill of goods on the impact of pass rushers. We've seen this shift towards the importance of interior pass rushers, which is going to tickle his fancy, even though pass rushing was never something that he could do very well. And that's self-admitted. I'm not saying anything that he hasn't said before. But I'm just casually starting to run down the list of teams that have appeared in / won the Super Bowl in the last 5 years. And I'm going to come back with my findings in just a little bit, just to show you guys that there is indeed a correlation between that top-end success that you see on Sundays. And we've seen it netted out in dollars and cents. The spending in offensive lines has really become sexy nowadays. Word to Zach Martin, just got a big payday. The capstone to a Dallas Cowboys offensive line that I will still say back in 2014 really kicked off this party. People took notice. All of a sudden, they went out there and started mauling dudes. And they said, wait a minute, you know what? I think you can build a team like this. And then the Tennessee Titans happen. And then the Oakland Raiders happen. Hell, even the Cleveland Browns, who are going to win 6 or 7 games this year, decided they would follow suit. Spend a bunch of money on their offensive line. We miss you, Joe Thomas. You laid the foundation here. And so all that being said, the NFL understands it. We had a guard picked in the top 10 of the draft this year. Look what Jesus did. You're going to tell me offensive line's not more important. At ESPN Radio, at Golic and Wingo on the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed, you can go ahead and vote on this. It's the important work that we're doing here. It's the stuff that matters. It's going to pit a father against a son, though. That dynamic's always interesting, too. So this is something else. We're fortunate right now. In the midst of all this summer, we talk about doing this take bracket because, well, quite frankly, we've got to fill time, and we want to get you angry and hopped up enough to come in here, help do it for us. 888-729-3776, by the way. O-line versus D-line. Go ahead. I am not above being curried to, all right? You can come in here and kiss a little, you know what, and get yourself a phone call and get yourself on the air. I'm not above that. I will screen these myself, which is to say that Allie will screen them in favor of offensive line calls. Anyway, fathers and sons, mothers and daughters. Interesting thing that popped up yesterday, because in addition to all of this that we have going on right now, we've actually got a lot of sports. We got the World Cup. We had that Cormier fight over the weekend that I still want to touch on, the weird, bizarre promo that went on at the end of that. But we also have Wimbledon on. We have a chance to have the Wimbledon Final and the World Cup Final, potentially containing England, happen on that same Sunday. Serena Williams could very well be involved in another Wimbledon Final this year. And listen to what she had to say yesterday about the idea of her daughter. She's a new mother. We know much has been made of that. The new mother, Serena Williams, reflecting on what she wants for her daughter when it comes to tennis.
I could not go out as much as I love her. I don't think I could do it every single day, what my dad did. I don't think I could do that. And I actually would not be able to do that.
Why not tennis?
Oh, I don't know. It's a lot of work. And plus, I mean, her mom, I don't want her to have pressure from what I did and you guys talking about, are you going to be able to do as good as your mom? And I don't want her to have that.
She also went on to say that if her daughter did decide that she wanted to play tennis, she would be there to help her and all of those things. But I thought the reasoning that she gave was very interesting, because we hear this a lot with NFL players who treat playing professional football kind of like coal mining, in the sense that I did this so you wouldn't have to struggle. Why would you play this sport? And Serena Williams looking at it more from a way that I think becomes interesting when we think about some of the sons of all-time greats. We spend a lot, the sons or daughters, I should say, because we spend a lot of time talking about LeBron James Jr. and Bronny and LeBron's desire to play with his son in the NBA. We've certainly seen a father-son dynamic that goes on with the balls, but I always think back to Michael Jordan's kids, who were basketball players who for a brief time were in the public eye because they were trying to do something that their dad had done at the greatest level in sports. I mean, hell, listen, albeit it wasn't at the same level, but I had a dad that played 9 years in the NFL. There's a certain level of expectation and pressure that comes with that. And it's like the number one question that you get along the way when you're trying to do it. I really think it's less the pressure that comes with, man, you're supposed to live up to this, as opposed to what people just constantly want to ask you about, because that's everyone's default. That's the crutch. When they've got nothing else to give you, they say, well, what's it like growing up in so-and-so, with so-and-so in the house? And to do that with Serena bleeping Williams, who's going to be maybe the greatest tennis player of all time, but for damn sure the best female tennis player of all time, to have that kind of pressure, I can understand. And Serena has been very interesting to watch. And I don't know if this is just me paying more attention because this has been her coming back after childbirth, or if it's just as she's gotten older, she started to become more aware of her status as an all-time great. I mean, hell, we heard the clip the other day of Serena Williams forgetting how many Wimbledon titles she'd won and having to ask the media. That's where she's at right now. She's secure. Everything's good for her. But this understanding of her own greatness is, to me, endearing, because so often we hear people try and play this down. She's like, no, I kind of understand what I am. I understand what people are going to throw at me. And more than anything, I understand the force I'm going to be in the house for my own kid. And you talk to any parent. I'm fortunate I have a lot of friends that are new parents, and it immediately changes your perspective. All your time and your energies are focused on protecting this one thing. And it's interesting if protecting them becomes protecting them from you and what you've accomplished. Is that right? Is that right to stifle what someone wants to do? I'm not sure, but it's interesting that it's on her radar already, that it's something she's acutely aware of, and something that she's probably going to have to deal with, because kids tend to go into the family business. Hey. But kids tend to look at what their parents do, and they tend to see something that appeals to a lot of them. And it'll be interesting. We don't know what the future holds for Serena's newborn child. But we know at the very least what's on her mom's mind, and that's telling enough. At ESPN Radio, at Golic and Wingo, vote on the poll. Our
Summer Take Bracket.
O-line more important versus D-line more important. 888-729-3776. What's your take this morning? It's first and last here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
I've won Wimbledon 7 times. I don't even remember all the times I've won. I can't tell you what happened on match point, so I don't necessarily have to win another Wimbledon. I can end my career and have saying I won. Was it 6 times? It was 6 times. 7. It was 7? Okay.
That's not what love's supposed to do. Baby, don't go breaking my heart, breaking my heart. Baby, don't go.
Serena, just so goaty. She can stand up there and casually forget. Wimbledon, the one that we hold with more prestige than anything else. The one that seems to always find itself at the center of the tennis universe. Serena's like, how many times have I won this thing? Hell do I don't care. Good luck. It's first and last, Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. We're presented by Progressive Insurance, and you can get in touch with us in the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. That number is 888-729-3776. And today, we mentioned we have our Summer
Take Bracket.
So hot and hurt.
We have pitted some of the best takes that have popped up, both near and far, both recent and in the past, and pitted them against one another. Some of them we've just conjured up out of thin air, like today, because we like starting trouble. And we asked you, O-line more important versus D-line more important. What's the better take? Jared in Ohio, you're on first and last, and Mike Golic Jr. What's going on?
Hey, Mike. Thanks for the call, buddy. I'm going to side with you. I'm going to say offensive lineman is more important. I feel that they're not to belittle any defensive linemen, but I feel offensive linemen are smarter, know how to pull traps and pull in general. And I think that's just my take on it. And the side note, go Irish, beat Michigan.
There we go. Big early season matchup there. Going to be a lot of great offensive line play in that game. We appreciate the call. And yeah, listen, in addition to being vastly smarter, and I don't think anyone will dispute that, coming up football at 5, we'll hear from one of those smart, intelligent offensive linemen that joined Golic and Wingo yesterday to talk about something very heady like guaranteed contracts. Show me the defensive lineman that's doing that. I'll wait. Anyway, I was looking into it, and I was looking at teams just to simplify it down. Not necessarily a predictive metric, but something I at least thought was interesting in this realm was looking at the teams that wound up in the Super Bowl in the last 5 seasons and where they ranked on the rushing list. And you go all the way back to 2013 regular season up until this last year. And you look at really the Patriots being the outlier in this. We understand the Patriots and running the football are a unique blend. So if you kind of remove them from the equation, and they're in the equation a lot, so that's hard to do. But their success is different from everyone else's success. You look at everyone else. You look at the Super Bowl from 2013-14 season. The Seahawks beat the Broncos. The Seahawks were 4th in the league that season in yards per game rushing. The next season, the Patriots beat Seattle. That game where they didn't run it on the goal line, wink, wink. But Seattle, number 1 in the league in yards per game and yards per carry. The Broncos versus the Panthers the next season. The Panthers came steamrolling into that game behind the number 2 yards per game rushing offense in the NFL. New England versus Atlanta. Atlanta was 5th in yards per game and yards per carry that season when they gave up a monster lead that they probably should have held on to had they just run the ball and not fumbled and not taken that bad sack, all those things. And then, of course, this last season, the Philadelphia Eagles, who actually managed to topple the New England Patriots, 4th in the league in yards per carry, 3rd in the league in yards per game. The proof is in the pudding, friends. If you're not the Patriots, you better damn well be able to run the football. It's first and last, Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. So keep those calls coming. 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. But it's interesting now. We mentioned Major League Baseball all-star roster lineups started coming out yesterday. There's still a couple of those late ad votes going on right now. Try and make a late push for some of the guys involved in this. There's also that uncomfortable tension for one all-star in particular who's wondering, hell, what league he'll be playing for in this All-Star game, potentially. Then, of course, Manny Machado, the Baltimore Orioles, who has been trade bait now leading up to this All-Star break for a team that is absolutely tanked this season, has no real hopes, and so now is trying to figure out, before we let him walk out of the door in free agency after this year, what can we get in return for a guy that's become one of the top, if not the top shortstops in the league right now. And it's become interesting, the names that have come up in this conversation, and one in particular. Now, our own Tim Kirkjian, ESPN Major League Baseball insider, joined SportsCenter yesterday and talked about some realistic destinations.
There are 6, 7 teams that have real interest in him. The Diamondbacks certainly make sense. Brewers certainly make sense. The Cubs, Dodgers make sense. The problem is how much you have to give up to get him. Therefore, they're going to hold off until they get the perfect deal. That hasn't come along yet. They may not get the perfect deal, but they're not going to lose this guy at the end of the year just for a draft choice. So I think they'll deal him, but still a lot of work to be done before that deal is finished.
First and last here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. And that's where this gets interesting, because the one name that I saw brought up on this, and it was on CBS.com, and it came courtesy of Ken Rosenthal of The Athletic, the New York Yankees showing interest in Manny Machado. Here was the quote from Rosenthal. No deal appears close, and both Brian Cashman, the Yankees GM, and Dan Duquette, the Orioles executive vice president of baseball operations, declined to comment. The Orioles' preference probably is to send Machado to the NL, and the team likely would ask the Yankees for a steeper package than they would accept from other clubs. Still, the Orioles might be more open to a blockbuster with the Yankees than they ever were when Peter Angelos was more active in the operation of the club. Now, the Yankees set at shortstop right now, in theory, with Didi Gregorius there, who's a great player. Manny Machado's made it pretty clear he's going to play shortstop wherever he ends up. Got to move back there after his stint at third base this season. But with the Yankees adding more power on top of this, and we saw it this offseason. I mean, you make the move to add Giancarlo Stanton, you're not afraid of just adding great players when you've got the opportunity to do this. This is more accustomed to, this move would be more in line with the idea of the Yankees that we've all created. Now, we had a lengthy discussion about the Yankees buying championships and all these things that were part of the conversation the other day, but this really does have some of the feeling of that 90s blend of Yankees where we talked about the farm system for the Yankees, them building it up, selling off parts around the All-Star break and the trade deadline a few off seasons ago, having the success with their young players last year, and now starting to build on it through free agency this past offseason by bringing in the reigning NL MVP, and now potentially adding a player, or at least throwing it out there, which again shows you just the mode the Yankees have clicked back into now. They're ready to keep going after it. They're going to be relentless. They're going to explore all options. This feels like now the realm that we always fall into with the Boston Celtics, where if there's a marquee free agent out there, we understand they've got assets, they've got parts to move, and they're going to be involved in this. And that should make Yankees fans smile ear to ear, even if it doesn't happen. 888-729-3776, 888-SAY-ESPN if you guys want to weigh in on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. O-line versus D-line today on our
Summer Take Bracket.
So hot in here.
But coming up next, speaking of hog mollies and trenches, it's 5 a.m., guys. Time to put your hand in the dirt, get after it a little bit. Football at 5 next. It's first and last. Michael Oak Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
Now, first and last. First and last on ESPN Radio and on the ESPN app.
It's first and last. Michael Oak Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. Callers join us via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. And you can tweet the show on the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed at ESPN Radio and at mgolic Jr. 57 on Twitter. And guys, it's a busy morning around here. Busy in the sense that, yeah, we got a lot going on in the world of sports right now, but more importantly, we've set up a fake bracket full of takes that we need you guys to take very seriously because, well, hell, we're taking it seriously. It's our summer tournament of takes, the hottest takes pitted against each other. And this morning in particular should ring true at this time of day because 5 o'clock is important here in First and Last. 5 o'clock is where we've carved out a niche all year long to try and make sure you have a place where you can come and count on football, where you can come and count on it in its many forms. And we've gotten a couple of those forms this summer. And we're getting closer. We're getting a lot warmer to the football we're all accustomed to, about 3 weeks from training camps. We're in the midst of the football that we're learning to love, I think, slowly but surely, in the World Cup. We get all these great things that we get to be a part of, and we've got a special addition to it this morning, courtesy of our
Summer Take Bracket.
So hot in here.
With that being said, it is 5 o'clock. Liam, tell them what happens at 5 o'clock.
It's 5 o'clock. Do you know where your football is? Oi, it's 5 o'clock. Do you know where your football is?
It's right here, Liam. You cheeky man, you. And Liam is a nice segue into this. So we got our Final Four set in the World Cup. Looking at the teams remaining, and England is one that's captured a lot of attention, mostly because they've got a jingle now. It's coming home. We've got a tagline. We've got something to hold on to. 3 Lions, America, England. We got a little history. I don't know if you guys have cracked open a textbook in a while, but we go back. And so it's become an interesting look at this team that didn't come into this tournament with a lot of expectation, but now as it's gone on, seems to have actually gotten stronger. This according to one of our ESPN soccer analysts and voice of LAFC, Max Bretos, who joined the Will Kane Show yesterday.
I think they committed to the coaching. Garrett Southgate was the guy. And you know what he did? He was great. He picked a very young team that most of them are really playing in their first World Cups or at least significant roles. And there's that spirit that's above everything else about them. And they're getting better. So I think, when you have these guys who've gone through this process a bit, they kind of take things for granted. But these guys are playing with this freedom. And then when you couple that with the fact that the majority of them play for big clubs or in the English Premier League, they're kind of used to the wear and tear.
First and Last, Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. So we've certainly got England in their role in this, getting ready to face off against Croatia. And then we've got Belgium and France. Now, Belgium, a team that's also gotten hot through this. But it's France that our friend Casey Keller, ESPN soccer analyst who joined Golic and Wingo yesterday, actually said it has an advantage in one very important area.
When you have the depth of Pogba and then just some of the players that weren't even brought in because they were so deep that would have been starting for most other countries in this World Cup. So it's difficult for a team that didn't start the tournament necessarily playing extremely well, that they just found ways to win games. Right. And now as they're kind of peaking at the right time and playing very well.
That seems to be a common refrain for a lot of these teams. We always see the playoffs in almost any sport ends up being a war of attrition, but it's also along that way. If you've got a younger group, if you've got a little more of an unproven commodity, can you find that way to gel? Now, selfishly, remember, I need Croatia in all of this. We've got the Golic and Wingo teams that we have picked next door in order to get us through this year's World Cup in a way that we can talk about and we can feed to everyone else because, well, we're just learning to be soccer guys. We're just learning to be football guys. We're more of the oblong pigskin variety in these parts. So some updates there for your World Cup grouping. I saw Peter Burns, one of our college football analysts, speaking of finding ways to make it more palatable for everyone else, comparing all of your World Cup finals teams, your World Cup Final Four teams to college football squads. Shout out to England for getting the Notre Dame comparison. You guys are welcome. Now, as we transition perfectly there to our friends over at the oblong pigskin world.
It's 5 o'clock. Do you know where your football is? Yeah! It's 5 o'clock. Do you know where your football is?
We know it's right here, and we kind of started off the week on a really tickling note for me yesterday. It's collective bargaining season. We are knee-deep in the summer. We're about 3 weeks from NFL training camp, and so that means it's time to focus on a CBA that's going to expire in 3 years. But it's what happens every offseason because we watch these NBA players lap up all these guaranteed contracts. There was that, not to get too deep into the weeds, but that whole thing with cap smoothing or not smoothing a couple summers ago that netted a bunch of middle-of-the-pack free agents, these monster contracts that even other NBA guys right now are looking at pretty sideways. But the NFL guys always look at these full guarantees for players who most of us have never heard of, and they sort of scoff at them. And they say, well, we're putting our bodies on the line. Why aren't we the ones reaping the benefit of this? And one of those players this time around was Russell Okuu, executive committee member for the NFL Players Association, offensive tackle for the LA Chargers. And a guy who took to Twitter in the midst of all this to have a conversation about guaranteed contracts in the NFL. He joined Golic and Wingo yesterday to have that contract on air and said that if we want to see changes, if the NFL players want to see changes, they have the opportunity to do that. More importantly, nowadays, this generation of NFL players is very capable of doing this.
Players have the power to collectively disrupt the bottom line. Guys have seen that this year, but the real question is can we wield that power? And can we understand that we're experiencing a moment in history? And oftentimes it's hard to see it when you're in it, but I think this group of players, these guys now, can do it. And I think oftentimes people are always saying, well, how do you kind of get 1,800 players, 2,000 players all on the same page? And they see it as a weakness, but I see it as a strength.
It is a strength, and you have that many voices, but in talking to so many guys that have been current or former Players Association reps and guys who have been a part of it, it is difficult to maintain and hold the attention of this group of people. Even the leaders, it is difficult to always get them on the same page. There is so much you're fighting against because the goals are so varied. And so I really hope that Russell Okung is right in this. And I hope that they can direct this in the right place. Because while this sounds like the same tough talk we've heard before, if you go into his Twitter account, at Russell Okung, there are some interesting points about how the NFL's ownership has manipulated a lot of accounting measures that really affect guys when it comes to the way guaranteed money is worked into your team's cap. You hear that term dead money thrown around all the time. All these things that are done to the disadvantage of the player that he points as real places where they can gain ground if they're willing to, if they've got the ability to actually focus in on this as a goal, as a place where they can make up ground, because it's that fine line between asking for what's realistic and also understanding what the owners aren't going to give up. They're not going to get rid of the salary cap in the NFL. They're not going to actively wound themselves in places that they've already gotten, because there's still that leverage factor that's always going to work against a group of guys that are turned over faster than anyone else because of how violent their sport is. ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Commercial insurance through Progressive protects your business and your dream. Choose from over 30 coverage options at progressivecommercial.com. We've also got our poll at Golic and Wingo. Speaking of the trenches, speaking of big men doing big things, we've got offensive line versus defensive line in today's
Summer Take Bracket.
So hot in here.
Which is more important? Again, this is the take. Offensive line is more important to your football team than defensive line. You want a stout unit up front. Quarterback, the hottest commodity in football. You got to protect that at all costs. I've said the importance is like a chessboard. You work from the king, from the queen, and you work outward. And the thing's designed to protect, because you've got to keep the other team from cutting off the head of the snake. That starts with your offensive line, your nice, comfortable meat shield in front of the most important position in football. And then on the other side, those guys trying to get at him. So defensive line, especially in this day and age in the NFL, Aaron Donald probably going to be the highest paid defensive player in football sooner than later. We've seen what a guy like J.J. Watt is capable of doing. I'm trying to just help Dad out if he's still driving in right now, to just give him something to hold on to going over there, because he's coming into this argument with an arm tied behind his back. It's going to be bad this morning. 6 to 10 a.m. Eastern, Golic and Wingo. Book it. This is an unfair fight, and the poll numbers reflect that so far. We'll update that. We'll hear from you, 888-729-3776. And we'll also take a look at our second poll question of the day, and one that I'm really nervous about throwing out there. It's first and last on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
Oh, say the sky made a perfect sunset, and that's a day I'll never forget. I had a barbecue stain on my white t-shirt. She was killing me in that mini.
I don't feel great about what we're about to do. We are about to pit two groups against each other that have more in common than they're ever going to care to admit. And I'm going to spend most of my time trying to massage that middle ground. It's First and Last, Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. Tweet us in the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed. Surprise a friend or a loved one with a bouquet from 1-800-Flowers.com. When you order a dozen multicolored roses for $29.99, you'll get another dozen absolutely free. Go to 1-800-Flowers.com/ESPN. Two dozy. Send him to the D lineman in your life when he finds out how gross and unimportant his position is. This morning on our Summer Take Bracket.
So hot in here.
A completely made-up bracket that we created in order to fill time during July and get you angry about things and some of the takes that we've heard over the years and had stored up in the hopper, as some might say. Today, our first poll question has involved offensive line versus defensive line and which is more important. So the take, offensive line is more important versus the take, defensive line is most important. We've asked you to weigh in. Craig in Michigan, joining us in the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. You're on First and Last, and Mike Golic Jr. I ask you, which position more important?
Hey, Mike. Just saying, big fan. I'm going to say offensive line because of exactly what you said, the protection of the quarterback. And I think what you might find interesting and enjoy, because I'm from Michigan, is University of Michigan, their football team last year had two quarterbacks go down. And even though they had one of the top defenses in the nation, they still underperformed. And that was because they could not protect the quarterback.
It's absolutely right. I remember watching that Michigan team a lot last year, compromised a lot in protection. That was an area that has traditionally been a stronger suit for Michigan than it was last season. I'll throw even more at you. I got handed a note from our staff over at Golic and Wingo. You want more stats to back it up because my dad's going to throw a bunch of flowery talk at you about the importance of defensive linemen, and I'm going to kick facts with you. In the last 10 years, 20 offensive linemen taken in the top 10 of the NFL draft, just 15 D linemen in that same time. In 2013 alone, 5 offensive linemen went in the first round. It was a big draft for tackles. I do remember that one very clearly. So a lot of easy ways where you can get in and get a win with that group. It's First and Last, Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. Now, before we give you our second poll question of the day, one that's going to be very interesting, I wanted to have the conversation about Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard in this NBA offseason. Kawhi Leonard, by the way, who based on demeanor alone, based on everything, again, because Kawhi Leonard is the Rorschach test of NBA superstars. He's whatever you want him to be in there. You look at Kawhi Leonard, and based on everything in totality for his career, you see what you desire. It reveals more about you than it reveals about Kawhi. And the Kawhi Leonard that we knew for the first portion of his career, during his healthy years with the San Antonio Spurs, would have made a great offensive lineman. Quiet, diligent with his work, great teammate, works well within a system defensively, all these great things. Now the Kawhi Leonard that we know, it's called into question. Most importantly, and I should say mostly because we don't know Kawhi Leonard at all, but man, we keep hearing a lot about Kawhi Leonard. And one of the things I heard about Kawhi Leonard was that he was going to be the domino that kicked off NBA free agency. Tick, 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 tick. Still waiting. And the longer we wait, according to Sarah Spain, co-host of Spain and Fitz here on ESPN Radio, the worse it gets for Kawhi.
When this all began, it felt like all of the strength was on Kawhi's side, right? You guys have done something wrong. I don't think you handled this right. I want out. Now the Spurs are left scrambling, right? What are they going to do? This was the future of their franchise. And yeah, it still does most negatively affect the Spurs because they did sort of have this heir apparent that was ready to get the Supermax. But the longer this goes on, the more it feels like Kawhi is going to have to keep leaking out, well, also maybe the Celtics. Well, actually, I really like Portland. Well, I don't know, Toronto. It feels like every time a door shuts, he's going to have to go searching for something else. And he's probably not talked his way out of a Supermax deal.
First and Last, Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. And more impressively, Kawhi Leonard has actually found a way to Kawhi Leonard's this story into free agency. It was at the front of everyone's minds when this got going. This toxic relationship inside of what is usually a very stable organization, one of the first-class organizations in the world of sports with a great front head coach, a proud history of quiet superstars, and a long tradition of winning. And a guy in Kawhi Leonard who we were used to being the strong, silent type. Just play great defense, go play at an MVP level, be a top 3 player in the NBA, an NBA champion. And we'll keep it moving. And now all of a sudden, we've heard a little bit different. Now all of a sudden, that toxic nature of that locker room, of that team, with a guy who felt slighted because of injury and a superstar that all of a sudden, who we didn't know, who we felt like we knew even less now because we had assumed a lot about him, that was at the forefront of free agency. Rightly so, because it's interesting. But now Kawhi Leonard has done what Kawhi Leonard does best, and he's taken himself out of the headlines, and he's become an afterthought in this. We're talking more about Carmelo Anthony's free agency, which we'll get to next, by the way, since he is now in a position to end up after, not quite as simple as free agency. Oklahoma City's going to trade him, that team's going to waive him, etc. But the options on the table that are going to essentially net Carmelo Anthony free agency, that has become more interesting to us than Kawhi Leonard, because we have ceased hearing anything meaningful about Kawhi Leonard. And part of it is because of what Sarah brought up. This is what we deal with college players, regardless of the sport. The longer you are in college, the longer you are playing, the larger your body of work, the more that people have to sit around and nitpick. When scouts are looking at players, they have a larger body of work, and so it's easier for them to look at you and say, this is a more complete product. We can find the flaws in this, as opposed to, well, there's a lot of upside in this. We can really mold a lot of this ability. We're confident in what we can do, so we could take this unmolded ball of clay and we can turn it into whatever we want. At ESPN Radio, at Golic and Wingo on Twitter. I've completely backed myself into a corner here. Thankfully, Allie's here to remind me that my job is to introduce our second poll question of the day that we can explore coming up in a second. But our second poll question of the day, big gulp from me. Country music is the best genre versus rap, hip-hop as the best genre. I know what it sounds like we're igniting, and I promise that is not the goal. I'm actually up next going to explain to you why these two genres are so wildly similar and why I ultimately believe one is still better. And my whole perspective on that was shaped by Mike Golic Sr. That's coming up next. Plus, what did Ty Lue have to say about LeBron to his new head coach and Luke Walton? We'll get plenty of insight into advice about catering to and trying to hold on to the most important player in basketball. That's next. It's First and Last. Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio and available everywhere on the ESPN app.
Now, First and Last. First and Last on ESPN Radio and on the ESPN app.
Oklahoma City will work with Carmelo Anthony to try to figure out how they will exit this one-year relationship.
The Oklahoma City Thunder were looking for the old Carmelo Anthony. Carmelo Anthony was looking for the old Carmelo Anthony.
You're the Houston Rockets. You desperately need a Carmelo Anthony.
On the sheer basketball front, he does fit with what the Rockets are doing.
Carmelo did not get in Oklahoma City. He will get in Houston because Chris Paul will make sure he gets it.
It's First and Last. Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. I tell you what, masterful work by Carmelo Anthony. Timing is everything when it comes to free agency. Maximizing your exposure, and that's what Carmelo Anthony has managed to pull off right now. Now, free agent is a relative term, but with Carmelo Anthony, we understand him and Oklahoma City aren't going to be making sweet music together next season. And so Carmelo Anthony is trying to figure out where he's going to go elsewhere. And the rumblings we heard the other day as we have delved into the second half of NBA free agency, the half that involves the likes of Zach LaVine waiting around for Isaiah Thomas to sign, and what's going to happen with a guy that we once thought was going to be a max contract free agent when those seem to be handed out a little easier. But now the Clint Capellas of the world are sitting around waiting for those, and we're focusing our attention on guys like Carmelo that are probably going to get some version of the mid-level exception. That's where we're at, but this is the supplemental portion of team building that still has a great deal of value. We've often lauded Golden State for their depth and what they've managed to build in that bench and how important those pieces are. Now, they're not as important as the 5 All-Stars that'll play for Golden State this year, but they're still important enough. And Carmelo Anthony's a name that we're trying to now reconcile our opinions of, both positive from what seems like long ago, negative more recently, his perception as a part of a winning team, if he can potentially be that, and where he fits now in the future. And brought this up the other day. If I'm Carmelo Anthony, I would rather be in Houston than in Los Angeles. You may want to play with LeBron James, and there are things that LeBron James is going to offer you that I think Chris Paul and that group in Houston can still offer Carmelo Anthony. The difference is Houston can also offer him a realistic opportunity at a title. But now that Houston has lost Luke Mbamute to free agency and Trevor Ariza, they've given up a lot of three-point shooting, and for that reason, Jenny Dial-Creech of the Houston Chronicle, who yesterday joined Freddie and Fitzsimmons here on ESPN Radio, said Carmelo Anthony would be a great fit for the Rockets.
Carmelo Anthony's specialty is and always has been putting the ball in the basket, right? And he plays a lot of ISO, and it doesn't work with everyone. That's why he gets called out for not being a team player all the time. But that's his specialty. There is no better coach in the NBA at facilitating that specialty than Mike D'Antoni. That's the system he's created in Houston. The majority of it is James Harden, and Carmelo Anthony would have to understand that. But when Harden's resting, when Paul needs a breather, if you have another guy who does what those two guys do, you don't have to change anything up when you're the Rockets. There's a lot of ifs and ands and things that he has to do. There's some egos that have to be swallowed. But on the sheer basketball front, he does fit with what the Rockets are doing.
First and last, Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio, and there needs to be that honest conversation here, because what Carmelo has traditionally been and what a winning team is going to need him to be appear to be two largely different things. This is an honest conversation that I heard Steve Kerr talking about that they had with Boogie Cousins when they brought him over. This honest conversation where Steve Kerr says, we want you. We like to run our offense through the post. Are you going to be okay with markedly fewer touches than you're used to, volume-wise? Because that's just how we get down out here. We got 4 other All-Stars on the court, guys that have been MVPs. They need the ball. And Boogie said, yes, of course. I understand how this goes. I love passing. I want to be a part of this. There has to be honesty so that both sides can function, and there needs to be a commitment to that. It's fine and good for them to all say that now. We'll see if they hold to it. The same goes with Carmelo Anthony, because I think Jenny brings up an interesting point in what he can offer you, and that was what we talked about with the Golden States of the world. That was what we talked about Cleveland needed to fix when LeBron James was in-house, was having someone to shoulder the load when your main guys aren't on the court. But I think the best version of Carmelo is dependent on those guys. He's dependent on James Harden or Chris Paul to be able to facilitate for him in a way that puts him in positions to score that don't involve him having to pound the rock, even though that is exactly what Houston majors in. I don't think that's the best version of Carmelo anymore. And I think he gets offered that in Los Angeles with LeBron James still. The difference is the ceiling for winning is not as high in Los Angeles, but what LeBron is going to afford you is the same thing. Now, with LeBron comes a great deal more uncertainty. First and last here on ESPN Radio, and that uncertainty was the subject of a conversation between LeBron's former head coach Tyronn Lue and his current head coach Luke Walton, who was seeking out advice and who Ty Lue is more than happy to give advice to on how to handle everything that comes with having to coach and corral the game's best player. Being a teammate of this guy and having to try and be the one that calls the shots with him in the building is a markedly different conversation. Dave McMenamin, our ESPN NBA reporter, I feel like we used to say ESPN NBA Cavs reporter. Oh, how the times have changed, Dave. Enjoy that sun in Los Angeles. Here's what he had to say about Luke Walton's conversation with Ty Lue.
Ty wanted to get past all the noise that surrounds LeBron, where people think that he comes in and takes over your organization and he causes problems. And he's a problem for the front office and for the coach and for his teammates. Ty's message is, man, the guy's a blessing. And anyone who gets to be in his orbit, they're better at their job and they're better for that experience. And so he wants to go into this meeting with Luke Walton and say, embrace it. Don't be afraid of all the stuff that comes with it. That's just the noise. Ignore the media scrutiny because what LeBron brings to the table is really a blessing because he's one of the greatest basketball players of all time.
And that's absolutely what you should say, because if you're Ty Lue, your life is better and you're wearing a ring because of that, man. I'm interested if a guy like Carmelo Anthony, it'll be a good litmus test. It's been an interesting free agency period outside of the LeBron acquisition for the Los Angeles Lakers. Seems to be a one-year goal pushing towards next summer. Does Carmelo think he can wait till next summer to try and have that top-end success, knowing that LeBron tends to facilitate for his teammates better than almost anyone in the world? I still, for my money, based on where Carmelo's at in his career, age, goals, everything else, what drives him, if the dollar amounts are comparable, Houston seems like it should be the spot. 888-729-3776. Weigh in on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line on our two polls. Now, we've got O-line versus D-line up, which the more I look at it, as we've asked you in our
Summer Take Bracket.
So hot in here.
A collection of the best and brightest takes all going up against each other in a bracket that we have constructed purely for our entertainment and yours. Offensive line more important versus D-line more important, and it is just a bloodbath right now. I honestly feel bad for what we're doing to D-linemen. They don't deserve it. They're not that bad. But, I mean, come on. How are we going to look at this and say anything about D-line being more important? That might actually, the more I think about it, and this is the tension, it might be the better take. Because offensive line is so clearly more important that saying D-line is a more important position to your team resonates louder. People go, wow, why would you say that? You must know something that I don't know. Because, my God, we have a doctor playing offensive line in the NFL. They made a movie about an offensive lineman and Michael Orr. We have more offensive lineman analysts at this network than we do defensive line analysts. I think Dad's on an island with that one. I mean, my God. We need to send a life raft out there. We need to throw a preserver out and help these guys out a little bit. I'm going to try and do my best version of that. I'm feeling a little more generous because this has gotten so lopsided. But you can also vote on our second poll now. And this is where it is going to get interesting. Because our second poll is country music is the best genre versus rap is the best music genre. This reminds me of the oft-played Jalen and Jacoby game, cultural or regional. And it's going to get very interesting. And I've already seen some people tweeting, because I said there is a middle ground in this. I believe in the genres of music. These are the two best, both side by side, the two best storytelling genres that exist. They're the most long form, and they account and they give you the most room to flex and tell stories. And there is also the widest gap between really bad and really good in both genres. Because there is a lot of crap in both genres, and there is a lot of really good highbrow stuff in both genres. And I can party to both of them, which I appreciate. The funny part is, in all of this, if I were to tell you that my father, Mike Golic Sr., brought me to one genre, brought me to one of these genres, introduced it to me, I have a feeling I know which way you guys would all categorize this. And it's not true. My dad is the person that introduced me to hip-hop music. I would vote overwhelmingly in favor of rap on this one. That's just where I sit in all this. And it's because of my dad. It's because my dad, in his desire to be this, inspirational and get us going and take me and my brother and my sister and introduce us to this idea of working hard and overcoming adversity and being ready for your moment, introduced me to the 8 Mile soundtrack. And that song, Lose Yourself, that was the most popular hit on that soundtrack and was all over the radio. And my dad played for us in the car and said, guys, really listen to what he's talking about here. And I said that, and I said, yeah, but the rest of the soundtrack kind of bangs. Like, I think I'm going to explore the rest of this. And then I listened to Rabbit Run and a number of other songs, and the game was changed from there on out. So my dad is the person that I have to thank for that, oddly enough. Now, I asked you to vote at ESPN Radio, at Golic and Wingo on the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed on this poll. I am very interesting. It's close right now, and I'm just looking at the potential for the next round where we could have country music as the best music genre versus offensive line as the most important position in football. And I am honestly wondering what white people are going to do with themselves. 888-729-3776, 888-SAY-ESPN on the 1-800-Flowers. That's the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Either way, it's good. All right, we're going to try and figure out just how we help my dad out in this, because he's got a rough morning ahead coming up trying to defend defensive linemen on Golic and Wingo. Plus, where would Melo fit best? The sports I would shy my children away from, and causing issues between me and Dad, and how we're going to work through them. It's all next, first and last on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
Music, the moment you own it, you better never let it go. You only get one shot, do not miss your chance to blow. This opportunity comes once in a lifetime. You better lose.
It's first and last, Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. We take you up till Golic and Wingo every Monday through Friday. They're 6 to 10 a.m. Eastern. Buster Olney going to join at 7:05. Baseball Tonight podcast. One of our insiders here going to let us know what the hell's going to happen with Manny Machado. Is there really a chance that we could see him in Yankee pinstripes? Taylor Twellman going to join at 8 a.m., our ESPN soccer analyst. He heard Casey Keller was poking his head around the Golic and Wingo universe yesterday. Says Taylor Twellman's turf. Get the hell out. Get the hell up on out of here. We'll see if we can start some soccer beef there. Damian Woody, fine offensive line analyst at the network here. Large man, big bear paws on him. That's the last person on earth at ESPN I would want to put hands on me. Straight up. And Craig Burley, 9:30, our ESPN FC analyst, going to join in studio with the guys as we continue on in the day. Been a full day around here, man. This tournament of takes, this
summer take bracket,
so hot in here
that we've started, the remnants of free agency in the NBA. It's all going to it's going to end me before I'm done. We're just getting back into this. Allie and I have come back from a hiatus. We have emerged, the phoenix from the ashes, rising at 4 o'clock in the morning and going promptly back into a ball of ashes because it's 4 o'clock in the bleeping morning. But we're doing our best. It's just, we may have bitten off more than we can chew to start right now, but it's all right. We've stretched out. We're limber now. We're ready. We're going to handle this. We're going to handle it the best way we know how. Going to handle it by getting dumb hyped to techno beats on a day where we're trying to pit hip hop and country against each other.
My fist bump this morning was not as good as normal.
No, I was going to say, if anyone, obviously none of you are watching because this show is never on TV and radio is a very non-visual medium, but usually there's a tremendous amount of fist pumping that accompanies this song. I hope if you're in your car somewhere right now, on your way to work, on your way to the gym, you get your own little fist pump in there. Ours was lackluster at best this morning. It was a real 2 out of 10 effort.
We failed.
It's all right. We'll try not to fail at this.
All right. Why should people go bid on the Golic and Wingo barbecue experience for the V Foundation?
Yes, it is that time of year. Head on over to ebay.com/ESPN. There are tons of great experiences that you can bid on. And one of those, and I was really happy. This went really well when we paid it off for the winners from last year this summer. The Golic and Wingo barbecue experience. You get to come to my house, hang out. We had it catered, Bears Barbecue. The cook and the bear right in West Hartford was kind enough to help us out and provided a lot of the great food that we had. Our winners were awesome. We had backyard games at the house. We had plenty of cold beverages. It was an incredible day made possible by the generosity of the people bidding. And that's what this is all about. The V Foundation auction, SB auction, is incredible every year. It is an unbelievable cause. So please head over to ebay.com/ESPN. And go ahead and start your bidding there. Again, awesome experience, tons of great barbecue.
And don't pick either of us for Can Jam.
No, we found out that we are objectively bad at Can Jam, so maybe seek out a better partner, but conversely, it's going to be easier for you to come in and cement your legacy by beating the absolute hell out of us.
I'm pretty sure you need some new siding.
Oh, book it.
Do you think Melo would do better on the Lakers or the Rockets?
Yeah, so I actually think, and we look at Carmelo Anthony now in the second wave of NBA free agents and say, I think the Houston Rockets make a lot of sense for him. I think they make a lot of sense because of the opportunity. But Michael Eaves, one of our hosts on SportsCenter, joined the Will Cain show yesterday and actually said Carmelo Anthony and what he would get from his teammates in Houston would be the opportunity he needs to look at.
The thing that Chris Paul will give Melo that he won't get in Los Angeles is concern. And I mean that in the sense that Chris Paul is a point guard's point guard. He's always concerned about everything on the court, how it fits in together, how it relates to something else. Russell Westbrook is not that type of point guard. He's just different in personality. He's different in skill set. He's different in position. So what Carmelo did not get in Oklahoma City, he will get in Houston because Chris Paul will make sure he gets it. Melo understands going there, he's not the best player on the team. He has to realize that. There's no question he cannot understand that. So the expectations have to be different.
Yeah.
But Chris Paul understands what Carmelo would need in order to keep him engaged, but also in order to put him in the best position to succeed, so the team succeeds. He gets that more in Houston than any other place in the league.
First and last, Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
Is Kawhi first and lasting this offseason?
Yeah, speaking of Kawhi Leonard, you remember that time eons ago at this point where I was hearing from all of our NBA insiders that Kawhi Leonard was actually going to be the domino that kicked off the NBA free agency party this offseason. Where he landed was going to affect LeBron James, Paul George, and all the other big movers and shakers from this offseason. And then we forgot who we were dealing with because Kawhi Leonard is A, not a free agent, and B, not someone who is used to making headlines. This is foreign territory for him. And so what did he do? He quietly slid back into the abyss right now. We haven't really heard much about Kawhi lately. He'll probably end up being the last domino to fall this offseason in one way or another. And kudos to him for finding a way to span that entire time and be relevant in a way that Kawhi Leonard has never been before.
Serena doesn't want her daughter to play tennis. Is there a sport you wouldn't want your future child to do?
God, a sport I wouldn't want my kid to do. I would say badminton just because I'm not mature enough to handle the terms that come along with badminton with any degree of regularity. I'd be chuckling like a child in the crowd if I had to address the object in play in a game of badminton. And so I would say avoid that one, if nothing else, because your father is an overgrown toddler.
Is today's poll question on O-line versus D-line going to rip your family apart?
I thought it was going to. I realize I'm going to have to bring it together. One of our
Summer Take Bracket. So hot in here.
O-line versus D-line. It's just so overwhelmingly in favor of offensive line as a practical answer that I'm starting to think D-line is the better take. So maybe I'll help Dad out because I think it's the hotter take, and I think we can really craft something that people will like.
Is it the storytelling that makes both country and rap two of the best genres in music?
It feels good to say that, and it makes me seem like I care deeply about the best of what each genre has to offer. Our second poll question today, by the way, in the
Summer Take Bracket.
But really, it's because I know with either genre, I can fill a red Solo cup up with the liquid of my choosing and get absolutely ratchet, and it all plays somehow. Country and rap, giving you the best party music on the planet. Well, maybe all second to what you've got pulsing through your veins right now and our friends at EDM. It's first and last, Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.